Welcome to the Lead with Your Soul podcast. I'm Michelle Wright, your host and fellow traveler on this journey of self-discovery. This podcast is designed for women navigating life transitions and yearning to embrace their true selves. I'll be sharing my personal journey from navigating the complexities of divorce and blending families to reshaping my career to something that resonates with my soul. With 3 decades as a teacher and mentor, I'm here to share insights, heartfelt stories, and practical strategies. Together, we'll explore how to cultivate self-love and create the vibrant, fulfilling life you deserve. Join me each week as we dive deep into the art of living authentically. Welcome to the Lead with Your Soul podcast. My name is Michelle Wright, and I'm your host, and I'm so glad you're here today. Today, I want to talk about the life transition in divorce. Over the past couple of weeks, I've really been digging into some stories where I was emotionally, some of the processes I needed to go through as I'm preparing to create an offer so that I can help people one-on-one through coaching to go through that life transition of divorce. I was able to really see how it went into different stages. My first stage was my first divorce. There were just different stages that I needed to go through as I led myself through the healing of divorce. Now, you may not know, but I have actually been married 3 times. The first time I was married, it was very short. I was in my early 20s. The second time that I was married was in my late 20s and early 30s. And the third time, and currently am, married in my early 40s. So there's a lot of life that happened in between there and a lot of healing that happened. In reflecting, one of the things I realized is that in the first stage of divorce, when you first get divorced, you are just feeling so overwhelmed. Your emotions are just spilling over in so many different ways. You're feeling angry, you're feeling betrayed, you're feeling like you can't trust yourself or other people. You feel lonely, you feel sad, you feel depressed. It's just overwhelming. And I think for me, what it really felt like was just free falling out of the sky into this deep, dark hole into the earth. And I didn't know how to stop it. And I just was hoping just to hang on to someone and just stop that free fall. And some of the ways that I did stop feeling overwhelmed, at least in the beginning, was by numbing my feelings, actually not dealing with them at all. So in my first divorce, I was much younger and I drank, I went out partying, I started dating again and I started going on dates. So even just that feeling of meeting someone new, your endorphins get going, your dopamine hits, you're just starting again. And I recognized that I didn't deal with any of those feelings. I didn't know how to. And even my loved ones weren't sure how to help me. My mom, in my first divorce, brought me to the doctor. Now, he was a family friend, and she's just like, okay, well, can you help her? And he was, Michelle, you have a broken heart. Said your family, you play big, you love big, you grieve big, you have big emotions. And this is just part of who you are. So what that kind of said to me was, well, like you just have to deal with it. You just have to cope. It's okay. So how do you cope? Well, when you're overwhelmed with your feelings and you still have to go through life, you just find a way to numb them. At least that's what I did. Which got me into my second marriage about 5 years later. And I had healed a bit. I wasn't in that depression. I wasn't still in that deep, dark hole. But I definitely had not really considered what were some of the behavior patterns that I had, my relationship patterns for myself, And who was I choosing? I hadn't even looked at any of that. So I got married again, fell deeply in love, and we had 2 children together. Now, hindsight, I can tell you that one of the things that I did recognize as my second marriage was starting to erupt and dissolve was that I chose broken birds. That's my chosen pattern of relationship. And I chose that because I have a history of childhood trauma and I was looking to have control. So by having broken birds, I felt like I had more control. I wouldn't have been able to articulate that at that time. I now could see the pattern later on and use these words, but I did start to recognize it was the same type of pattern at that time. I recognized that broken birds, having control was helpful. And then what happened is I'm actually a person that really wants to live in collaboration and equal footing with someone. That's my true way of wanting to live. So my broken bird wasn't able to provide that. In fact, they often had trauma of their own, and then that resulted in actions or situations that just weren't good for our relationship, our marriage, and our household. So I had to make some really difficult decisions in the second marriage, and I was horrified because here I was again. I was divorcing. It did invite me to stop, and I recognized that from the first to the second marriage, I didn't heal. And I had another gift. I had the gift of my children. And so I just couldn't start dating again. I couldn't do the same things I did before. I couldn't just numb my emotions and just get all these quick dopamine hits. Now, did I still numb my feelings through eating? Did I still numb my feelings through working really hard and being exhausted? And yes, I did do that. So I did find a way to numb my feelings, but not that way of dopamine and getting into another relationship. I just couldn't do that to those little itty bitties. And the reality was, as a single mother with 3-year-old twins and building my career as an educational leader, I didn't have time. I was working hard each and every day, and I would come home, and it was just enough to make sure that we connected, got food on the table, had a great bedtime routine, and I was exhausted and fell into bed. So I have to say, for those first couple of years, just even existing was my goal. And then later, I started to recognize how I needed to heal. And sometimes that even comes sooner because you're alone and your kids are with their father. So when they're with your father, you have all this silence that is in your life that is an opportunity to heal. It could be, and you could see it as an opportunity to numb these feelings. I chose the second time to see it as an opportunity to heal. And that was a beautiful and difficult process. The idea of the butterfly comes to mind, right? That idea of you're a caterpillar. And I really felt like a caterpillar kind of going through life. And then this next part for me was being in the chrysalis, was just really like being that goop and being lost in that goop of the butterfly and in that chrysalis, because you're not one thing or you're not another. You have no idea what you're becoming, and feeling goopy, sludgy, and dense was definitely where I was at. And I had to find a way to move through it. So I networked. At this point, I did have a network. I went to therapists, I went through coaches, I went through card readers, tarot readers, and that was so helpful in many different ways. As I've mentioned before, one of the first things that I did do was I started looking at using angel cards. My mom had them, and my mom at that time was a Reiki healer. So the idea of energy healing, that idea of going deeper from a mystical level really intrigued me. And I started to lean into that. And using her angel cards, it just helped me connect to hope, light, and possibility. It just shifted my thinking and just allowed me to almost have like a rope ladder into this deep, dark hole that I felt that I was still in, called depression, called burnout, called exhaustion, overwhelm, or the chaos of transition, or being in the chrysalis in the middle of goop. And the angel cards gave me hope in different ways. I came from a church background, and that church background, though it helped me in many ways feel connecting to prayer, feel connected to something bigger than myself, within the structure of religion, there was a lot of emphasis on sin and you did it wrong and you deserve this. And kind of that idea of punishment and just feeling bad about myself, who I was, and the choices I made. I mean, here I was. This was my second divorce. And I just had a hard time getting past that. But spirituality, Doreen Virtue's angel cards, the idea that angels are here just to love us, are here just to heal us, are here just to celebrate us, and that they're just around us. And even as I say this, I can get chills because I can just feel that energy and that essence around me. They're just here to be and love. And I started to uncover a feeling that I might be worthy of this love. And that was powerful. One reader talked to me about it in a way that said, you know, Michelle, I want you to think of the creator, God, universe, whatever you want to call that. And for you, whatever you want to call it, that essence. I mean, I also love Star Wars, so you could call it the Force. I also love the movie Avatar, and you could call it Awa, just that essence, that something, that feeling of something bigger than us. And she said, Michelle, I want you to imagine you holding your little babies in your arms. What is the feeling in your body? What are the thoughts in your mind? What's going on your face, in your heart? And I just said, I love my children. I love my children more than my own life. I think they're wonderful. I think they're amazing. I think they're awesome. She said, okay, I want you to imagine that. Imagine them, you're just holding them in the palm of your hands. What is it? What does it feel like? What is that feeling inside your heart? And I could just feel so lit up. I just felt such a strong, burning light, love for them. And she said, I want you to imagine that you are in the hands of the Creator and that she's looking at you in that same way. And she has that feeling within her heart, her mind, her soul, and just looks at you with such love and awesomeness and is holding you. And even I could tear up when I think about it now. I just cried. I just said, really? There's someone, that Creator, that holds that for me? And that's when I recognized the vast difference between the love I had for my children, the love that the Creator had for me, and the love that I had for myself was huge. There was a huge difference. In fact, I could feel a deep emptiness inside of me. Thoughts that would come to mind is, if I could just be anyone else beside of me. Like I thought about that when I looked in the mirror. I thought about that when I engaged with different people, not so much as a professional, but as a human being, as a woman, as Michelle. I often thought that if I could just be someone else. And I recognized that my cup of love was so empty. Another thing that becoming spiritual, looking at different spiritual teachers, I started looking at Louise Hay, Carolyn Meese, Dwayne Dyer, Hay House, and Hay House Radio. And there were different teachings in there. And one of the teachings that really spoke to me was that challenges are not because you did something wrong. Challenges are not a punishment. Challenges are an opportunity for growth, an opportunity to spiral upwards, to continue to expand, to continue to change, grow. And you look at something from a new vantage point, from a new perspective, from a new version of yourself. You're the same Michelle. You're the same soul. You're the same human, but you've grown. And we get a bit of that because if we think of our thinking when we're little or, being 5, 6 anyway, of our childhood memories, we recognize looking back at them, how they're so different from our robust memories as we're adults. And the same thing starts to happen as we allow these difficult journeys. And for me, that was the divorces I was going through. I could be curious about those, and I could start to be curious about the lack of love. I could be curious about how I could fill that, how I could grow, how I could continue to expand. And I did. I read more. I filled myself. Instead of self-loathing and food, I filled myself now with different teachers from Hay House. And I started recognizing something that was integral to me is that, first of all, because I had already been within a system, a church system that had capital T truth, and if you didn't do it, you were wrong. It was considered sin. One of the things that I started to build around my beliefs is that there's many different ways to get to the same path. And one of the teachings was about these monks, these blind monks around an elephant. And these blind monks are trying to describe the elephant, which is creator, God, universe, void, whatever you see it as, this mystical essence that is present. And one blind monk is at the trunk saying, oh, it feels like something that's really wiggly, it's skinny and gets thicker. One is at the tusks, no, it's hard and it's round. One is at the foot and saying, no, 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 it's really solid, attached to the ground. One's at the ears, the tail. And as you can imagine, each and every one of them described it differently, had a complete different experience and a different truth. And that really freed me because I started to recognize that we can have different truths, because the capital T truth is that they were all touching the elephant. They were all touching the mystical. And so no matter which teacher, whether it's me or someone else, they're describing their experience of that elephant, just like I'm describing it. And I invite you to think about, as I talk about this, what your experience is, because it's just as true. It's just as validating. And it's an opportunity for you to explore your own path. And as you go on your own path, you're going to identify with some of these stories and even fill in some of your own. I recognized as well as I was going through my divorces that it was hard. It was hard to deal with the lack. It was hard to, especially in the beginning of a divorce, it was hard to turn off the tap of love, because love isn't a tap. I mean, one day you're with your husband, you're the person you're deeply in relationship with, and you're sharing a bed, you're sharing meals, you're sharing resources. Now, you might be in deep arguments and fighting and not feeling well and really grinding, but that person is present. And if you have a history of trauma, actually, sometimes that feels like your new normal. And so when you have the absence of this person, it's not a tap you can turn off. So how do you deal with that? How do you start to understand and heal that wound that is searching? How do you start to recognize the responses in your body? Because maybe now you're not in this volatile situation and there's actually calmness, and this new is actually freaking you out even more. And as you dig deep into healing and trauma work, that's one of the things that you're going to see, is that having relationships that create a lot of friction, a lot of emotional overwhelm and arguments and fighting, our nervous system is actually something we're used to recreating. And that's where some of that deep inner work, I would say child work, looking at the childhood trauma that I did have, I recognized that I needed to go and dig deeper into the childhood trauma because there were some patterns in there that I needed to heal, that I needed to look at. I needed to process my feelings. I needed to understand them, not from a loathing place, but from a deep loving place, and allow myself to heal. I needed to look at some of the programming that came from being in the house that I was raised, from being a woman in Western society, from the programming that comes from being a single mom and what everybody thinks about that, and how I needed to change that and what I really wanted to look at. So I had to revisit these ideas and feelings about myself. And that takes a lot of work to lead yourself through that. And it's also hard. Sometimes you can process this with close family members and close friends. In my experience, though, at times that can be very challenging to do the deep work because they had their own experiences, their own perspectives, and their own understandings. And often I would get into should haves, or they had a hard time holding space for me just to feel, just to process, and just to evolve into my feelings. So I needed to reach out, and that's where therapists, coaching, reading books, self-help books, getting me ideas, and card readers. And I went to see another one, a beautiful one that I would see on a regular basis. And she helped me one of the first times by she was reading the tarot and kind of going through and trying to connect with the energy of looking what would happen with love. And she said, Michelle, I need you to even believe that love is possible. And I recognized that I was completely blocking love at an energetic level. I just were like, nope, there's just, I suck at love. Love isn't going to be good. So just, love happens to other people, not me. Didn't even consciously, until she said that, recognize that that was a real limiting belief and block that I had in my life. So even though I had healed a lot of the other pieces, that was a huge one. So I did. And she looked at some different possibilities. And just like any predictive work that comes from divination, when we look at the future, it's so beautiful because she says, your future is built on sand, meaning that as you evolve and change and expand, your future evolves. So it's not like, oh, this is a future that is possible, and if you want another one, you can't change it. And that was a new learning for me as well, that you could actually change and evolve and create the future that you wanted. So that gave me a strong locus of control that I really love, and agency. And it also, through a connection with the divine, allowed me to surrender and lean into it, to become more solid in my chrysalis, less goop. And I also needed to figure out what love even was. So a practical way that I did that was I started reading every romance novel that you can imagine. The cheap ones, the smutty ones, the sci-fi ones, the supernatural ones, watched romance movies. I needed to fill my imagination. I needed to fill my mind and my soul with the possibility of the mystical, the magical, and just the amazing ways that love can come into different lives and how love can be different for different people. And that was incredible for me. It was an incredible journey. I absolutely loved it. I still have those books and enjoy them because it was through them that I could begin to dream, that I could begin to imagine what it would be like to be in a loving relationship. Imagine what it would be like to meet a partner that was a good fit for me. So that was a huge step in the right direction as I was leading myself towards a positive relationship. And this positive relationship did come. For me, it took 10 years. I took that time. I was busy building my career, busy raising my children. And I recognize now, as I look back, it doesn't need to take 10 years. There are lots of processes, there are lots of understandings that I led myself through slowly, through trial and error, that I now know. And everybody's going to take their own time. There's no right, there's no wrong. Everybody's going to find what they need as they understand that there's nothing wrong with them. They're just in the state of remembering their soul, remembering the call of their soul in whatever way that they are called to be in love, in relationship, in service to others, in love with themselves. I would love to hear from you. Send me an email, send me a DM, hear your story, how this resonates with you, where you see it crosses your own story and your own experience, and what you found helpful. Most importantly, I need you to know, if you're going through this, and especially if you're in the beginning, in the middle, is that you're not alone. You need to know that if you're in overwhelm and shame and guilt, you are not alone. And you were created to be loved deeply. And like many other women listening who have been divorced, they see you. We see you. We hold you while you heal, and you recognize the amazing light that you are inside of yourself. I'm excited as we move forward, and I can offer processes and ways to work with you to bring hope, to bring light, to just bring that joy of possibilities, to spark your imagination and your evolution, and see what more your soul can bring to you. Until next time, keep leading with your soul.
That wraps up another episode of the Lead with Your Soul podcast. I'm so grateful you chose to spend this time with me. As you navigate your own life transitions, remember to be gentle with yourself and embrace the journey. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe and share it with others who might benefit. Join me next week for more insights and inspiration. Until next time, keep leading with your soul.